Let's talk about block entities. It's time to understand everything about block entities and progress forward. Hello everyone, this is Adi Reza. Welcome to the Mentor Code Lab. Every time we open Minecraft and we play Minecraft, we are dealing with two different entities. One is the living entities, mobs, players, animals. These are living entities. On the other hand, we have block entities. Understanding block entities is a little bit hard at the first day, but the more you work with them, the better you understand them. Basically, a block entity is a limited version of entity that sits in the block pose, and that block pose is dedicated to a block. For example, in this picture, we have a chest. Now, a chest is a block. However, at the same time, in the same block position, we have a limited version of an entity that is called block entity, an entity that is related to this block, in this case a chest. Same goes for shulker boxes or barrels, ender chest, enchantment table, brewing stand, furnace, and other machines that we have already in vanilla. Now here's the question: why would you want an entity that is working hand in hand with a block? There are many different reasons. For example, in case of shulker box, chest, barrels, ender chests, we have an entity that has inventory and is producing the ability to have inventory for the block. On the right side, we have blocks that not only have inventories, but they have to do some functionality. For example, the enchantment table will have few different slots, and when we call slots, we are talking about inventories. Don't worry, we will work with inventories in future. And when you put different things inside those slots in the inventory, a menu is opened on the right hand side, and you can choose from few options there, and the enchantment will happen and your item will be enchanted, and some items will be consumed. The brewing station is more interesting because not only it has some slots for the inventory, also it will convert some of these items into a bar of energy of some sorts, its internal type of thing, and then at each enchantment it will have a progress that will process forward each tick, and at the end, when the progress is finished, it will reduce some of that energy bar and then give you the enchantment. Furnace, for example, has this burn time and at the same time has the progress bar. For example, you will put a coal into the fuel slot and the furnace will turn on. It doesn't care if you put anything to be cooked or not. It will consume that fuel and burn for a certain amount of time. If you put anything that is cookable, then a progress bar appears, and if the furnace still has the fuel and still has the burning time left, it will start cooking the item, so the progress bar will go forward. At the end of the progress bar, the furnace will cook the item and give you the final result, and regardless of anything else, it will still reduce the burning time. Same goes for others like a smoker or blast furnace. This is what we call block entity, a limited entity that adds additional functionality to a block and works hand in hand with the block to produce the ability to have entities, to have progresses, and to have the logic that will happen each tick inside the game. Now in Fabric, we have extra APIs on top of that that we can use. We can have fluids, we can have energy, and by energy, I'm not talking about burn time or something like the brewing stand. No, the actual energy system. And this is what we call block entity. Now, the process of adding our block entities into the game can be confusing at the start if you want to do all of it in one video or at one go. Because if we think about something like furnace, brewing stand, or other type of machines in vanilla, we have a screen that when we right click the block will pop up. This screen will show us a user interface for that machine. Up until now, for a furnace, for example, we had inventory. We had progress system that will happen each tick. And now on top of that, we have a user interface that we have to show the user, and we have to tweak that user interface, giving the user some feedback. And adding all of this into your block entity class, at the same time registering the block entity class, registering the screen handler. Yeah, there are tons of things that we have to deal with, and it can be overwhelming. From this video forward, we will start little by little, add little by little to our knowledge and start using it at least few times until we understand one concept, and then we move forward toward the other parts. It's time to add our own block entity into the game for at least one of our blocks. I may not be able to provide the logic in this video. We will come back to that in the next video and add our own logic. All I'm trying to do in this video is to make sure that you understand the first steps you have to pass so that you have your block entity. Now, you may remember that we had this abstract activatable block. Abstract activatable block is just a block that has a Boolean property on it. And if you remember, we had this section that on use, we were flipping it to be activated. Now, goos are really aggressive blocks, and I don't want to accidentally right-click them and activate them and destroy something in the world. So I have to make sure that when I'm using the block, I will just return action result.success. Basically, do nothing. On the other hand, when I'm using an item on the block, I will have to add the logic to activate the block and make sure that it works now. To add our block entity to a block, we have two different options. First, we could use block with entity class. This is a class that is just extending block and implements an interface. And if you read the Java doc, it says it is generally easier to start with block entity provider yourself. The reason is that this abstract class is adding some boilerplate that you may not want in your classes. For example, the getRenderType is returning invisible. Basically, this will make your block invisible. If you are adding your own model, or if you are making your model in Blockbench, or if it's just a cube all model, why should it be invisible? So if you are extending block with entity, you always have to override this and make block render type.model as the returning value. On the other hand, some things like unsynced block event is doing some things for you that may help you get easier life using block entities. Create a screen handler factory, that's for creating a GUI. And finally, this validate ticker will help you add your ticker for the block entity. However, in our case, we are extending from our own abstract class, and no, we can't add the inheritance to abstract class because this is a block that only has a Boolean property on it. So instead, we will do what he is doing ourselves. Basically, we are going to implement the block entity provider as suggested by Java docs, and this will force us to implement methods. I will select the create block entity, get ticker, and get game event listener, and hit add. And it will add it on top. However, I will cut them and paste them below the unused because I want to remember that this section is related to block entity provider. Okay, also, I will come back to this block with entity. I will copy this method. It's a protected, but I will make it private, and I have to tweak something. If you notice, it is already having this problem because I think when we are generating the sources, this part is being changed and the class itself is yelling at you. So when we are copying it, it will yell at us, and I didn't want to close that class. God damn it. So I have to fix this. But how to understand what we need to change? If I move my mouse on ticker, you see that it says I'm requiring a block entity ticker of type A. But what you are providing is this question mark super E. So if I replace this question mark super E with the capital A, it will fix this one. Also, between the videos, I may sit back and think about a solution for this because honestly, this is not what I like to do, and I think there should be a better way. I will look around inside different repositories from other mod developers to see if we find a better solution for this. However, right now we have few things to do. The very first thing that we need to do in our block is that whenever we have a block that is actually providing a block entity, we have to create a codec and return that codec. So right on top, before the constructor, I have to say public static final, but I will remove this final word and I will call map codec of type. The type is the same class, so water eating goo, and we call it codec equals to. Remember, this create codec is an internal class of any block, and all we have to give in, as you see, is a function of abstract settings names and type. Whenever you see a function, means that you have to provide a factory. Here we have to say water eating goo colon colon, and then we produce new or otherwise the constructor as the function that we should call. Now that we have the codec, we come back down and we override the get codec, and instead of calling super, we return the codec. This should happen on every block that is responsible of having a block entity. Right now, I'm not sure. I think this codec is not generally used by Minecraft API, but it is recently added to the game. So I assume that Mojang has plans for this, and in future versions, we really will use it. So keep it there, and if you forget it and find an error message about codec system, remember that you have to add a map codec for the block itself. Okay, now we have to provide our block entity and its functionality. Let's take a look at this get game event inside this block with entity. As you see, actually block with entity is not overriding it, but it's overriding this unsynced block event. Let's take a look at what is happening here. It is calling the super, then it gets the block entity, and if block entity is not null, it is calling unsynced block event on top of it. So let's get it. Let's get it and put it inside here instead of this get game event listener, because it looks like it should be there. And okay, we need to change this block entity thing here in a few minutes, because we have to check if the block entity is actually the type of the block entity we want. Okay, let's start from top, because I think we just have this get renderer that we don't need, and then create a screen handler factory. Let's copy it, and it's again one of those things that I will make it private right now and static. Okay, it's an override, so I will paste it here, and it's an override, so we don't need to change anything. I will keep it there, but I will comment it out right now because I don't want to deal with it right now. And also one thing that I noticed, it's named, so where are you setting the name? Nowhere. Okay, now we can close that and focus on our job here. Remember this one, we just need to move to this method after creating our block entity. Now the way many people teach you on YouTube is to make an error here. Just remove that and remove this part basically and get done with it, because now we have two errors here. And then when you progress forward, you will see that we have an error on water eating goo and you can't compile the game. It will yell at you and you come back and fix things. However, a professional programmer, especially those who want to learn programming API, will not work like this. What they will do is that they will assume that they have the class and they will start writing the code as if the class is already there. For example, I can say new, and here I will say water eating goo be for block entity, and I will pass in position and the state. And now if I hit alt enter, it says create class water eating goo be, and it asks where to put it, inside what package. And inside packages, I have this block entity package. Hit enter, and you see that immediately I jump into block entity, and it is adding this water eating goo be, and now it is making the constructor for me. It is extending block entity, and it's just asking for names, and that's it. And here I will call something, then the position and the state. That something is now again one of the things that I have to add here. But before I will deal with block entity, because well, we have to deal with block entity, I want to finish this one. For the ticker, I will say validate ticker. And as you see, validate ticker is asking for a type, and thankfully this get ticker is providing the type for us. Then it is asking for expected type of a block entity, and it says block entity type block entity. This is where things become interesting, because again, I will write something that is not there. Water eating goo inside mod block entities, comma, then the factory is water eating goo be colon colon new. Again, I don't need this one anymore, so I can come on this error, hit alt enter, create constant field, and instead of object now, I know that we have block entity type of type water eating goo be. And no, I don't want to initialize it here, and it shouldn't be final. So I have that here. I shouldn't have any more problems. I have a little problem here. I accidentally used new here. It should be the tick method, because this is the tick method provider for your block entity. And right now, of course, we don't have this tick method. So if I move my mouse on top of this tick method, if I click here and hit alt enter, it says create method tick, and I do it, and it jumps into the water eating block entity T, and it returns void, word, block pose. I will use pause, block state. Now T is block entity, and I will call it entity. Remember, we had this error here because now it's mod block entities dot water eating goo as the type, and that's it basically. Now we have a block that is using block entity, that is letting the block entity tick with game tick. Basically, this logic on this method will happen 20 times a second. Also, we added it to mod registry class. However, we are not registering it yet. Now here, I had a helper method. I did a massive refactor that I talked about it in previous episode. It is now sitting on the registers. So all I have to say is entities dot register, and I will remove this registers section, and here I will add dot entities, and it will fix the thing. Now I will have to add a name. Okay, water eating goo. For the block entities, we have to provide a block. You notice that we have this overload that is not accepting a block. That is for mobs and animals or villagers, any other entity type. But for block entities, we have to provide the block that is associated with this block entity. It's easy, mod blocks dot water eating goo, and finally the block entity factory is water eating goo be, and here the method that we want to call is the constructor, and that's it. From now on, if I need to add another block entity, I just duplicate this line, change the name, duplicate this line, and change the name here, use the block and again the class here, and of course I need now to assign it to the variable, and that's it. We registered our block entity in the game. The moment we start the game and we put a water eating goo in the world, we will have a block entity associated with it, and anything that happens here will happen 20 times a second. If you want to, I'm warning you, it's not a good thing to do, but if you want to, you can make a log here and log something, and you will see that it's constantly logging that text into your runtime log file, and you will know that the entity is working. So far, so good. One last thing. We were calling unsynced block event. Now, unsynced block event needs to basically check if the block entity is instance of something, then call it. Although it says you can simplify this, and if you do it, it says block entity does not equal null, and this. I prefer to be a bit more consistent, and if I say if block entity instance of water eating goo be, then I will say var result equals to, actually I have to keep the boolean, so result, and I will say result equals to the return value of this method call, and at the end I will just return the result, and here I need to check if block entity does not equal to null and its instance of be. What are you yelling at me now? Oh, be. Okay. Don't forget this be part. And of course, you can now remove unnecessary one because it's a type check. And we need to instantiate it as false to begin with. Okay. So this is our class. However, you notice that this will become a repetitive type, isn't it? And the reason it was implemented inside the base class was that it was simply doing the repetitive job of everything. So if you want to keep this as it was, of course, now it makes sense to check if it's not null and this result, and that's simplifying things. Why did I do this? Because I want to have a new base class. I don't know. I'm debating on this because I have this machine abstract block, and for this, I'm sure that whatever is extending this machine block will have some block entities associated to itself. So if I implement it here, something interesting will happen. You notice that it's not yelling at me about implementing methods. The reason is that the class is abstracted. However, now I can have this section of code inside that abstracted class. Basically, let's take a look. This one is not asking for any special class, and this one is behaving in such a way that we don't need to be worried about a class. So I will add it there. And from now on, anything that is inheriting abstract machine block, for example, I have a bunch of them here, pulverizer is extending a machine block. Now machine block is extending abstracted advanced machine block. And here is when you will have problem, because abstract advanced machine block is extending abstracted activatable machine block. Activated machine block is extending abstracted machine block. So by inheritance, I'm making sure that when I'm adding this block entity provider to the very base of the machine hierarchy, when I have this base machine class, now it yells at me that, hey, implement the methods for create block entity and get ticker. So I have to do that. I will keep them as it is, and I will put to do on top. Now, here's the thing. I'm not going to add anything inside here because this is, again, the base class for all of my machines. And of course, if I want to, I can make this one abstracted again, and then I don't have to be worried about these methods. And if I want to show you, it will not yell at me here, but if I go into Pulverizer, now it says to implement the methods. This is a better approach because honestly, this machine base is something that I want to have, but I'm not sure if I have to add too many things here. It's a way of abstraction for a technical mod like, I don't know, industrial craft, build craft from old days, and now we have modern industrialization and many other tech mods that are out there. They use abstraction as much as possible because as you move forward, you will have more flexibility. Also remember, all the things that are sitting under util package from the register, pose, math helper, abstracted blocks, configs, or anything else will actually being ripped from my mod and become its own library mod. And because of that, I am doing abstraction on top of abstraction, especially for this machine block. And energy base is again another abstracted one. And you will understand why I am separating these things, because the more we go forward, the more you will understand that, for example, this energy bank will have energy storage in itself. The machine base will have energy storage in itself, but in machines, I will have extra thing like inventories, and maybe in some of them I will have fluids. And these base classes are responsible of adding the very base construction and structure that is being needed for every machine that I have. Back to the topic of block entities. Now that I have my block entity inside the code, I can go and start writing my logic for this block entity, but I will keep it separated inside another video because honestly, I want to walk you through the process of adding your block entity step by step. It's a very complex topic for beginners, and I want to keep it as simple as possible in each video. If you like these videos, please subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and turn on that bell so that when I publish a new video, you will get informed. Have fun, everyone. Bye.